On today's show, Tari Eason injured and out for 4 to 6 weeks. Who steps up to fill the void in the Rockets rotation? Plus, mailbag questions like, will we see a trade later this season? And what can the Rockets do to clean up their turnover problems? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. On today's show, we're going to be discussing the Tari Eason injury, the amount of time that he's been missing, 4 to 6 weeks, how that impacts this Rockets team, and who they're going to have to look at to help fill the void in the rotation during his absence. Then we'll get into some mailbag questions and topics, things like, do we see a trade coming down the pipeline for this team, even though it's early? And what are some of the things that they can do to clean up the turnover issues, and kind of what's the evaluation of the team at this point? And what do we think they're capable of? A lot of different things to get to from the mailbag questions. I appreciate everybody who pitched in a mailbag question for this episode. First, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. Shout out to my guy, Rockets Culture. I ran into him the other night, and it was great talking a little Rockets ball. It's always great running into the everydayers out and about. Thanks for saying what's up, man. Really appreciate it. All right, let's get into today's show. And look, it sucks because we knew that the Tari injury was like going to be a thing, didn't know how severe it was going to be. And we find out it's going to be, they're calling it an oblique strain. And the timetable has been listed at 4 to 6 weeks. Now, Mama Eason has already been on Twitter basically saying he's fine, he's just sore, and like, you know, he'll be back right as rain. And the first thing that I want to address here is for people who are like, see, Tari's injury prone, he can't stay healthy, can't stay on the court. This was such like a freak incident where he was trying to fight around a screen and just completely like collided hips with another player. And, you know, I don't know. I fail to look at Tari as, I guess, injury plagued or an injury concern or whatever. Just because it feels like the things that have kept him out of games have been such freak incidents that I don't think it's not like a recurring thing where he has like ankle problems or a knee issue that keeps popping up, or, you know, I don't know, things of that nature. Right. So regardless of the cause, right, and you know, looking at it through that lens, it's disappointing because of the season that Tari was having, shooting a blistering like 50% from the 3-point line, filling a much needed role on this Rockets team on both sides of the floor, defensively as a point of attack guy, as one of their best, most switchable defenders, playing up or down in various lineups, bigger or smaller lineups, and then offensively, what he's given them, right, as a floor spacer, and is one of, if not their best 3-point shooter. I'm pretty sure he's been their best 3-point shooter. Maybe Okogie's numbers are still slightly higher, or like Reed's over this ridiculous stretch, but basically one of their best 3-point shooters, right? And so losing Tari and what he provides is going to be a significant blow, right? It's not like a backbreaker. It's not going to completely derail the Rockets, but losing him certainly hurts for this next month and a half, however long it's ultimately going to take for him to get healthy and get back in the rotation. This would be a fantastic time for one Dorian Finney-Smith to step up and be available in the rotation, but we have yet to receive another official update on DFS, which in and of itself is a little concerning. I'll be completely honest. And so at this stage, like, it'd be great if DFS was able to like suit up like within a week from now, because then you like whatever the delta is between the games Tari misses and like whenever DFS is eventually able to come back, like you can essentially cut down on that, you know, on I guess the pain of losing Tari by getting DFS back. And then I know DFS and Tari aren't identical one-for-one players. They play the game differently. They provide different things, but you can at least then plug DFS back in, and you're not going to feel the absence of Tari nearly as much as you otherwise would have. But at least right now, with no Tari and then no guarantee on when we're going to see DFS, the Rockets are going to have to dig a little bit deeper in their rotation, right? They've already called back up J.D. Davison from the RGV Vipers ahead of the game against the Orlando Magic Sunday evening. So, I mean, you're going to look at some combination between Jae'Sean Tate, Aaron Holiday, and possibly, again, even some J.D. Davison minutes to kind of replace Tari Eason. Although I would say a dark horse contender for trying to replace some, maybe not all, of the Tari minutes is simply just going to be the Rockets leaning even heavier into their jumbo lineups or their double big lineups against the matchups that will allow them to do it, because they do still have Clint Capela, who has played really, really well in the short amount of minutes that he's gotten so far this season. And if you lean further into that identity, if you basically keep two bigs on the floor for most of the game, then you can kind of juggle, you know, between Kevin Durant and Jabari Smith Jr. and Amin Thompson, letting them kind of fill in the gaps on the wings. And then you have your guard rotation of Josh Okogie, Reed Sheppard, and then you just sprinkle in one of, you know, maybe some Aaron Holiday or some J.D. Davison. I know we saw Jae'Sean Tate in some like very brief minutes the other night, like at some actual rotation, non-garbage time minutes. So maybe Ime just keeps it simple and goes with Jae'Sean Tate. But given Tari's importance as a floor spacer for this team, it's frustrating because there isn't a one-for-one replacement, because you can't just go to Jae'Sean Tate because he's not the same level of floor space. You can't just go double big with Clint Capela because that's not providing the same amount of floor spacing that Tari Eason was giving you. And it's also not the same level of perimeter defense that Tari Eason was giving you. So there's not exactly a clean replacement option here for the Rockets until, knock on wood aggressively, until until DFS is ultimately healthy. And so that's kind of in a weird way, this Tari injury just puts an even bigger spotlight on like, hey, like check the clock, like when's DFS going to be back? But at least in the interim, we know that the Rockets have a variety of different ways that they can play. We know that they're able to win in different ways. And woo! Mid-sneeze podcast. That was rough. I didn't even have time to hit the mute button on that. I apologize. Anyways, we know this Rockets team is capable of winning in a variety of different ways, right? Losing Tari hurts them, and it hurts their floor spacing. It hurts their lights out three-point shooting, and it hurts their defense. But at the same time, it's not an injury that is going to completely derail the success of this team. And they do have other talented players they can go to and try and at least fill those gaps for 10 to 15-ish minutes a night. And then maybe you just increase the workload for a couple other guys, right? Maybe you give Reed a little bit more burn than usual, you know, get him up to closer, you know, to 25, 30 minutes a night, give Steven Adams more run off the bench, and then just kind of fill in those wing minutes across the trio of Amin Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., and Kevin Durant, at least until DFS is ultimately healthy. So losing Tari hurts, and it's frustrating. And it's definitely another kind of disappointing blow to the early going of this Rockets season. But the fact that they've been able to kind of overcome the injuries that they have had so far, again, no Fred, no DFS yet, still hasn't suited up in a Rockets jersey. And now the Tari injury as well. Like, you know, this is part of what you have to deal with as an NBA team throughout the regular season. This is why you have all this depth in the first place. This is why you have those guys in the stay ready crew who are ready to contribute at a high level in case guys get injured. And so now it's up to those guys to be able to kind of step up and, you know, next man up mentality and kind of weather this storm, at least until DFS is back. Now, if we get to a point where like Tari is healthy again and returns before DFS is still able to suit up for the Rockets, then at that point, we're starting to raise some like alarms and some alarm bells, because that's going to be a pretty major concern. I don't think that'll be the case, but hopefully we see DFS in a Rockets jersey and out there on the floor sooner rather than later. And of course, we'll have you covered for all of that whenever it does ultimately happen. I want your thoughts on the Tari injury and who do you want to see replace Tari Eason in the rotation? Who do you want to see get an opportunity with no Tari Eason in the rotation? Give me your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Coming up, we're going to get into our Locked On Rockets, a mailbag of questions, things like, do we see this team making a trade at some point this season? How can they clean up the Achilles heel that has been the turnovers for this group? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, but every day, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for these opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a bit of a headache in between waiting in queues and surprise fees and prices that jump right up right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Look, I've used Game Time so many times to buy Rockets tickets. It's the best ticket buying experience on the market. My favorite part, they are fully transparent. The price you see in the bottom little corner of your screen is the price that you're going to pay at checkout. No hidden fees, no surprise, no digital service charges or digital handling fees or none of that stuff at the very end. No convenience fees. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's go ahead and dive into our Locked On Rockets mailbag questions here. And I appreciate you guys for chiming in with these mailbag questions. Thank you so much for it. As always, love the participation whenever we get to do these mailbag edition episodes. Let's go to our first one here from my guy Tiziano. If the playoffs started now, how far would this team go? I think it's a really tough question, ultimately, because this team does still have a lot to figure out. It's not like they're a finished product. It's not like they've been together long enough to know what this team is ultimately capable of. Now, just based on the sheer talent that we've seen on the floor, how dominant they've looked against certain teams, and how competitive and how closely they battled against a few of the upper echelon teams in the league, right? Against the Thunder, against the Pistons, against the Spurs. Yes, they lost those 3 games, but I think that you've seen enough to be incredibly encouraged by this team to think that, yeah, even if the playoffs started tomorrow, this Rockets team would make a fair bit of noise in the playoffs. And that in and of itself is really encouraging when you think they've got, 70 some odd more games to go through in order to fine tune things and work on things and allow guys to grow and develop and get even better with their respective games, right? Specifically, a guy like Reed Sheppard, who very much feels like kind of the X factor for this year's Rockets team, right? If Reed continues to grow and get better and better and develop exponentially as the season progresses, we might get to a point where, the Rockets again feel comfortable with Reed being inserted into the starting lineup, or to a point where there is no concern of like, oh, they don't have a traditional point guard, because Reed just becomes that guy as the season progresses. And so that's kind of where I'm at is right now. Like if the playoffs started right now, this Rockets team is still making a ton of noise. And I think that the proof is in the pudding with how good they've been through these first 11 or so games. They have the number 3 net rating in the entire NBA, the number 1 offense in the entire NBA. And it's enough of a sample size now that we're a little past 10 games into the season to kind of believe and say, you know what, these numbers are kind of legit. And we should be bought in to what this team is ultimately capable of and what they're doing on a night-to-night basis. I will, there were a couple questions about like some proposed trades. Like, will the Rockets go after, somebody asked if the Rockets would go after like James Harden at the deadline with the Clippers imploding, or like with the Mavericks and firing Nico Harrison. Like, would they go after maybe Kyrie Irving or Anthony Davis or something, some of these big names that are out there. And again, there's like a level of like attraction to like the guards, right? The Kyries and the Hardens because of the Fred VanVleet injury. Here's the thing. Fred VanVleet has an implicit no trade clause. He's not going anywhere that he doesn't want to go. And that is a problem. Now, originally, when we did our discussion, when we talked about the possibility, right, of maybe like a Fred and Tari trade for like Derek White with the Celtics, at least some of my reasoning behind that was like, you're not sending Fred to a loser situation. You're not sending Fred to a bad team, a team that isn't going to be competing for a title, right? The only reason the Celtics aren't competing for a title still this season is Jason Tatum rehabbing his injury. But in that hypothetical off-world scenario, if the Rockets did go for like Derek White, right? And if they did do like Fred and Tari, whatever, that team is still at, one of the best teams in the East. You're able to still contend at a high level. You could maybe talk Fred into saying yes to a trade like that, but you're not going to send Fred to a, dog water team, an imploding Clippers team, or a bad Mavericks team as a part of a return for a James Harden or a Kyrie Irving trade. It's just not going to happen. And outside of that, the Rockets do not have the available salary without looking at some of their big key contributors, without looking at one of KD or Sengun or Amin Thompson or Jabari. Like, they'd have to include too many other valuable key pieces to be able to pile up enough salary to make a trade like that work in season. So it's not going to happen. The Rockets are not going to make a big trade for any of these potentially available stars ahead of this deadline. I know how exciting it is to possibly entertain the idea of, oh man, James Harden back in a Rockets jersey and teaming up with KD finally in Houston. Like, it's cool to fantasize about that, but it's not rooted in any level of reality just because of the implications of like the CBA and kind of where the Rockets are at and how everything has to kind of like, how you have to be able to match money and get the salary costs up there to be able to absorb a contract like Kyrie's or like James Harden's, unfortunately. So I'm just going to dead those conversations right there. You can entertain them in fantasy land, but it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. And that's the reality of the situation, is like, Rockets are not going to be able to pull off a big trade this season. Now, I say all that to say that one of the follow-up questions was, that it's never too, that it's a kind of a combo here from Ed and from Mike. Ed, and who goes so far as say it's, never too early to start thinking about the holiday season. What should the Rockets be asking Santa for this year? I think they should be asking Santa to fix their zone defense. No, I kid. But the idea of like, do we see any trade coming for this Rockets team this year? And a little bit of a cop-out, but it's a little too early to tell, because the one biggest area of need for this Rockets team would be potentially a stable veteran guard who you can trust in those super high leverage moments in the playoffs. And funny enough, the Rockets might not even have to trade to get a guy like that, because they have that 15th roster spot open. And come, I think we said it was January 8th is what we said. Come January 8th, the prorated amount of the vet minimum that the Rockets can offer to a buyout, to an available free agent, a buyout candidate, that kind of stuff, will officially be low enough that it can fit in under the remaining amount of money they have up against that first apron. And the one name that I keep circling back to, and there's probably a few other names out there that would make a lot of sense. Like, hell, I mean, the Rockets just played against them the other night, but like Drew Holiday. I actually don't even remember what's left on Drew. Oh, no. Drew has a bunch of money left on his contract. Never mind. That's not happening. Drew's a bad deal right now. But I keep coming back to like CJ McCollum as a potential buyout candidate, a guy that could be bought out by the Wizards. And if he is, I know that CJ McCollum, like, on a $20-30 million deal is like you're like, no, that's not good. But CJ McCollum on a vet minimum deal coming in and being like a piece that can come off the bench and be a stabilizing guard force who's, had success in the playoffs, who's been there, done that a little bit. And I wouldn't even go so far as say like somebody who comes in and like supplants Reed Sheppard in the Rockets rotation, but just to have a little bit of additional guard depth for some of those really high leverage moments in the playoffs where if you really want to be able to rely on a veteran hand, then you have that as an option. The whole idea of the Rockets making a trade in the middle of the season does kind of hinge on where Reed Sheppard is at developmentally by the trade deadline. Because if the Rockets have confidence in Reed Sheppard, if he continues playing the way that he's been playing, and if other guys continue to grow and develop and Amin gets better with the ball in his hands and Sengun continues to rack up the assists and look confident and comfortable kind of steering the boat, if you will, then I don't see a reason why the Rockets would feel that they need to be forced into making some kind of a trade for a veteran point guard. And I'll shout out to Salman Ali the other day who made this argument online, and I co-sign it 100%. There's been like a hesitancy to buying into the potential success of this Rockets team this season, in part because of what we thought this team would be with Fred VanVleet healthy, right? And so now there's like that cloud hanging over the team, like, oh, if they had Fred VanVleet, then like the turnovers wouldn't be there and like this wouldn't be happening and like who knows what, right? But if you just remove that, like if you try to separate the Fred injury and if you just take this team at face value for what they've done 11 games into the season, they're absolutely one of the top 5 teams in the NBA, arguably the top 3 team in the NBA. And despite the turnover issue, right? They've still got their flaws. They've still got their warts. They've still got things they need to clean up. But this team on paper is absolutely still a contender right now through the early part of the season. And the only reason it feels like sometimes, we are having issues grappling with it, or like even some of the national pundits or whatever, like giving them their flowers, is because we're kind of stuck on that, like, well, what if? Like, what if they had Fred? Then like how much better would they be? Doesn't matter. They're good right now. Like the what ifs and the whataboutisms with Fred doesn't matter because they are good right now. And so I think that given enough time, which, the Rockets will have another 30 to 40 some odd games before the trade deadline ultimately gets here, which is more than enough data to basically make it a very educated guess as to whether or not they feel like they truly need another set of veteran hands to be able to kind of steer the show from the point guard spot, or if they have the confidence in Reed Sheppard's ability to be that guy for this roster. For a deep postseason push, that'll kind of be the determining factor, right? And if they do go that route, they have options to be able to trade for a veteran guard without giving up, any of the key rotation guys, right? You have Clint Capela's salary that you can use for matching. You have all the stay ready crew guys, Jae'Sean Tate, Jeff Green, Aaron Holiday. You have all those salaries that you can kind of combine and pile together to try and get up to, anywhere from like a $10 to $15 million a year kind of impact guy. Now, keeping in mind, unfortunately, that like if you do trade for a guy that has a higher salary, you're going to have to still bring back some other vet minimum guys because ultimately you have to be able to field at least like a 14-man roster. So like that's part of some of the other like financial like hurdles they have to jump through ultimately. But if the Rockets decide they get to that point, they could make that trade. But as of right now, like, there's a part of me that kind of feels like they're not going to make a trade. Like there's a part of me that feels like things are going to settle down. They're going to have confidence in Reed's ability moving forward. And they're not going to get to a point where they feel they need to, break glass in case of emergency and make a trade, especially again, considering the fact that they could just target a buyout candidate at the end of the day and fill that 15th roster spot for freezies without having to sacrifice any of the actual pieces on the roster, because while it's really tough to think about like anything after this season, because like their ultimate goal is to win a title right here, right now, to the best of their abilities, because KD's not getting any younger. You will have Fred VanVleet back next season, right? And so you'll get a version of this team as presently constructed, plus Fred VanVleet, and that's really exciting to think about. So depending on how this season goes, right, like you don't want to mortgage the entirety of the future just to try and go all in on this one season, especially when you're going to be getting your starting level point guard back next season, plus an improved Reed Sheppard, plus everybody's a year older, plus KD's game isn't going to age poorly or any of that stuff. I don't know. Coming up, we'll get to the rest of our mailbag questions here. Like, for example, what can the Rockets do to clean up their turnover issues that they do have currently, and more. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score first to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every single game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, you can head on over to FanDuel.com. Take a look at the odds on favorites to win the title this season in the NBA. Your Rockets sitting in 5th place at plus 1,400. In front of them, you got the Knicks at plus 1,300, the Cavs plus 700, the Nuggets plus 650, and the OKC Thunder still the favorites to repeat at plus 180. So for all those odds and more, go to FanDuel.com right now, where they are giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Again, that's FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, let's get to our next mailbag question here. The biggest drag on the Rockets right now is how badly they are losing the turnover battle. How can they fix this? This is from Lurk. The turnover battle, I got the chance we asked Ime about this the other day, and part of it, as like simple as it is like the Rockets are just being soft with the ball at times. Like when you have teams that apply that level of like physicality and ball pressure at the point of attack and, on the perimeter in particular, like against the Thunder, against the Spurs, those two were the most egregious ones so far this season, right? The Rockets are going to have to be able to deal with teams like that if they want to win at the highest level this season. And other teams are going to see how much the Rockets struggled in those games and try to, if they have the personnel to do it, they're going to try to replicate that level, that style of defense and get really aggressive with the Rockets on the perimeter. And I think it's going to be twofold. One is going to be, part of it is the Kevin Durant turnovers, right? And KD's going to be turnover prone. He's going to have a few turnovers pretty much every game. That's the book on KD. It's been his case his whole career. But 8 turnovers is a little much, like he had against the Spurs, right? And a big part of some of the turnovers that we saw and have seen so far have simply just boiled down to this Rockets team is still learning how to play off of a talent like Kevin Durant. And so as teams are doing weird things like doubling him from 35 feet away from the basket or blitzing him out of a pick and roll and all these little things, as other guys get more accustomed to playing with him, they'll understand where they need to be as the release valve on some of these passes so that they can take advantage of his gravity when defenses are tilting so much to try and take him out of the game. So that's one thing, right? Is like part of it is just the Rockets need to get better at capitalizing on how defenses are game planning against KD. Some of it is Alperen Sengun, because some of it is him also still learning and adjusting to making those decisions when teams elect to double team him, right? Or trying to do a little bit too much, getting into the middle of the floor and having 2 or 3 or 4 defenders all collapse on top of him. And that part is his, still part of his growth journey, right? As a star player, is learning when to attack, when to go all the way with the ball versus when to, pick and choose his spots for a kick out to a wide open teammate or to a cutter that's flashing through the paint, those little things like that. You see even some of Alp's turnovers, right? I think there's a difference between good turnovers and bad turnovers. And the bad turnovers are the really ugly ones where it's like a sloppy pass or like miscommunication, or you dribble it off your foot, or you just get stripped on the perimeter where you're not being strong with the ball. Those are bad turnovers, right? But if you make a pass to like a cutting teammate and like the pass is just like a little off the mark, or a defender like gets like a fingertip on the ball, but otherwise it would have been like on the money and it would have led to like a layup or a dunk or an easy bucket or an easy 3-pointer, like those are good passes. And so I think that generally more of the Rockets turnovers have kind of fallen in the good passes category, outside of like some of the egregious ones, right? There were a few here and there in that Thunder and Spurs game in particular, but it does feel like part of it's just going to be getting stronger with the ball, taking better care of the ball, trying to get in and out of those sets a little bit easier. And you're seeing that the Rockets are being better about where they're throwing passes when they're trying to get those entry passes to Alp and KD when they're posting up, whether it's on the low block or on the elbow or some of those DHO sets on the perimeter. I don't know that this team will be able to clean it up completely and get to being like a top 5, top 10 ball security team in the NBA. You just don't want to see them be bottom 5, bottom 10, right? If they can just get to be middle of the pack and keep crushing it everywhere else in all these other statistical categories, you can live with that as the outcome. And the other like really piece of like low hanging fruit here is just like, as Reed Sheppard continues to get better, as they have like a legitimate guard prospect that they can lean on and rely on offensively, then that'll help a ton as well too. And that's going to be a big part of Reed's growth, right? Is can he be safe and secure with the ball? Can he limit his turnovers and actually effectively help the Rockets get in and out of their offensive sets? This one from Benedict. In what ways can the Rockets see improvement on ATOs and side outs, off-ball movement, disciplined defense, no gambling, and dropping zone as a whole, or completely changing the formation? This is a really loaded question. I love this question, but it's also really loaded. I'm going to stick with, I want to talk about the zone on this one because the zone has been such a sore topic to start this season. And I had a really good conversation with a couple, actually really good conversations the other day at the Blazers game with a couple Rockets coaches. And the general consensus is that they believe that they haven't defended as well as they think they're capable of outside of even the zone defense, right? They feel like they are a significantly better defensive team than what they've done so far this season, because some of defense, or a lot of defense, is about urgency and want to, and kind of just guys really locking in on that side of the floor. And they've had a little bit of a tendency to kind of play up or down to their opponents so far this season. And so some of that, when it comes to the zone in particular, the Rockets zone is not a traditional 2-3 zone. They've got guys who are flying around, and you got guys who are communicating and switching and rotating. It's a weird zone, right? We talked about this last season. Steven Adams called it a bizarro zone because of how they operate inside the zone. And because there are so many new pieces being introduced into that dynamic, it's going to take a little while for all 5 guys to feel interconnected and switchable inside that zone. It doesn't mean that there aren't some glaring issues, right? Like the Rockets' inability to just get back in transition and set the zone before teams attack it has been kind of a big glaring problem. But I'm not worried, I guess, about the defense at this stage, or I'm not worried about the zone, simply because the zone that the Rockets try to play, where they're flying around and swapping, passing guys off left and right and playing with a really high energy level, we've seen the zone lock in for a few stretches here or there this season. We just haven't seen it be as consistently good as it needs to be. And I think a big part of that is we're thinking about how good the zone was, in particular in the playoffs against the Warriors, where in the playoffs, everybody's playing at 110%, right? This is the regular season. We're 11 games in. There's not a sense of urgency to the zone the way that there probably needs to be for it to be as effective as it was last season. But they're also, like, I think comparatively, right, last season they gave up like 0.86 points per possession running the zone. This season they're giving up 0.93 last I checked. So it's like a 0.07 point per possession difference. It's not a drastic difference, but you just feel it at times when teams start knocking down perimeter shots. And a little bit of it is like, teams have a lot of film on the zone now, right? They're figuring out where those soft spots are in the zone, and it's going to be up to Ime Udoka and the Rockets to adjust and figure out where they can kind of cover some of those soft spots and get back to that zone defense being really effective. So that's at least some of my thoughts on the zone defense. From Pookie, why did the double big lineup work last year but doesn't this year? And no, I don't think it's about losing Brooks because we have a Kogi now. I'm not saying a Kogi is Brooks, but I'd say he's holding his own. The double big lineup is still working this year. They're still winning all the minutes when they run double big. Like Steven Adams is still crushing his minutes. When the Rockets have Adams and Sengun out there together, they're still winning those minutes. There's just a feel like when other teams start to go on some of these little runs, or when you see them knock down a few threes here or there, you're just like, oh, well, the zone's not working, or, oh, the double big is hurting the team. It's not. The double big lineup is still crushing teams. And I think it's important to remember the double big lineup was never about it was never implemented as a defensive solution. Like the double big lineup exists because of how good it makes the team offensively. Because when you have Steven Adams out there, not only is he providing you elite screens to open guys up, but he's also rebounding like half of the Rockets' misses. And now that this team is significantly better on offense, they're the number one offense in the NBA. Their numbers are through the roof. They're shooting the lights out of the basketball. And on top of that, it's like a coin flip whether or not they get the ball back off of a miss when Steven Adams is on the court. And so that's part of what's made this Rockets offense so potent is not only is it so good now on their first shot attempt, but on the rare occasions where they do miss their first shot attempt, they're really good at getting the ball back. And so it always boiled down to what the Rockets got offensively out of Steven Adams. And then the defense had to be kind of, it was a very big like interconnection of like Fred and Dylan. And again, that was two big parts of the Rockets defense and communication in some of those lineups. And even Jalen Green, who was a really important part of this Rockets defense last season, all of those guys being so interconnected defensively when they ran that kind of bizarro zone at the end of the day. Let's get to one or two more here that I've got pulled up. Is there a world where Reed Sheppard wins the Most Improved Player of the Year award with the injuries and lack of guard depth? It's certainly a possibility. If he keeps balling out the way that he has been, I could absolutely see Reed making a push for Player of the Year. Most Improved Player of the Year. I want to say he was at like plus 15,000 or plus 20,000 like before the season started. And I looked at his line the other day. He's plus 10,000 over at FanDuel. So I think he's creeping up. And as he continues this most recent stretch of play, like, yeah, there's absolutely a possibility for him to walk away as the Most Improved Player of the Year. I don't support it and I don't like it simply because I've made this argument before, but I don't think top draft picks should be eligible for being Most Improved Player of the Year because there's like a certain level of expectation that comes with being a top pick, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I've made that I've gotten up on my soapbox about that before, so I won't do it this time. Here's one. Can Sengun be in the MVP race from Red Edward? He's already in the MVP race. On the NBA.com's most recent MVP ladder has Sengun at 9th on the MVP ladder. Now, how much stock you actually want to put into the NBA.com MVP ladder, take it with a grain of salt, whatever. But at this moment, Alperen Sengun is absolutely and should be an MVP candidate because of what he's doing for this Rockets team. I made the argument that if his percentages had been a little bit better, around the rim last season, then he would have been an MVP candidate last year because the Rockets had the team success and he was the best player on the second best team in the Western Conference. This year, he's averaging 22.4 points per game, 10.2 rebounds, and 7.4 assists. He's shooting his overall percentage is back up to slightly over 50, so 50.3% from the floor, 45.9% from downtown, and 73.1% at the free throw line. His true shooting percentage is floating at just under 60%, 59.9, which is respectable for a big that's taking as many perimeter shots as he does take. So yeah, there's no reason why Alperen Sengun shouldn't be in the MVP conversation. And had the Rockets not dropped their first 2 games of the season, if they had won that game against OKC, that would have helped his narrative push a lot. Now, do I feel like he's actually going to win it? Probably not. There are too many other better players in the league. But the fact that a 23-year-old center is already drawing a little bit of discussion and being put into those conversations and potentially being mentioned as an MVP candidate at this stage in his career is nuts, right? This kid is so damn good, and he's only going to continue to get better. What was our biggest sticking point with Al P talking about what he needed to improve the most coming into this season? We talked about the 3-ball. We said if he unlocks the 3-point shot, and if it's even semi-respectable, 35, 36%, it's going to unlock at a completely different level to his offensive game. And we're seeing that and then some because he's shooting 45% from downtown. That number probably won't hold up over the course of the entire season. It'll regress some, but the shooting leap is absolutely here. And that was the one thing holding Alperen Sengun back from being an all-star caliber big man to ascending to superstar caliber big man. He is playing like a superstar. He's playing like an MVP, and he's playing like the second best big man in the NBA right now. So absolutely an MVP candidate for Alperen Sengun. And it might not happen this year, but Alperen Sengun might be hoisting an MVP trophy at some point in his career is at least what I'll leave it off on. Is Durant the greatest 37-year-old player ever? Greatest post-Achilles player ever as well? LeBron James still exists. I'd have to go back and look at LeBron James like year 37 numbers. But LeBron has been doing insane stuff for a lot of his career. And so it's really hard to say KD's the best 37-year-old player ever. He's certainly up there. And literally on the night that he talked about all the 35-plus guys still playing at elite levels in the NBA, literally that night, Steph went off against the Spurs. Harden went off and had a 40-point triple-double, and KD had his 30 on super efficient shooting. So these guys, I mean, they're the end of an era, right? Those three guys and LeBron as well kind of mixed in, and DeRozan and a few of these other like 35-plus guys. But, I mean, a lot of them still kind of feel like they have another 3, 4, 5 years left in the tank, which is kind of crazy to think about. The longevity that some of these guys have had is kind of absurd. So with that, I appreciate you guys for dropping in all your mailbag questions. I didn't get to every single one. I'll pocket some of these and we'll get to another mailbag down the line, and I'll save the ones that I didn't get to on this go around. But I do appreciate you guys for dropping those ones in. Thank you so much. And I want your thoughts on everything that we talked about in today's episode. Again, give me your thoughts on the Tari injury and who you want to see step up. Give me your thoughts on all the different mailbag questions that we touched on throughout the show. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.